Matt Frank, thank you so much for joining GXG. This is our inaugural episode, we're calling it the Talking Board, ghost-related sort of thing. Matt Frank, why
Yes.
did we pick Baragon to start our professional relationship, hopefully our friendship relationship? But why did we pick Baragon? Do you remember?
Well, I remember we talked about it. Well, so I remember that we got in touch because I think it was Chris Merjahangir put us in touch. He's from Toho Kingdom,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Hey, this guy's got Godzilla license." And Chris is a solid dude. He's always kind of keeping his eye out. He's just like, "Hey, these people don't have any established Godzilla artists working for them. Maybe you should talk to them about this." And I'm like, "Oh, sure." So we started talking, and I remember we had a really good first conversation, and we were ping-ponging ideas around, and we were going through kind of the Rolodex of monsters. And I think we settled on Baragon because we wanted a monster that was a little less mainstream. Like, it wasn't one of the big five, it wasn't Ghidorah, it wasn't Rodan or anything like that.
Yeah.
But also Baragon is just so damn cute, and we just love that character. We both love that character so much. And there's just, that's what I think I remember. I think we were just going through the Rolodex and we landed on Baragon because that character is so fun and unique in and of its own right.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I'm thinking about it because I know definitely like everything you said that's like true. But I'm like, I'm trying to remember because I know we talked all kinds of stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
Varen, or sorry, Vron. I don't know which way to say it. I say Varen, you say Vron. Tomato, tomato. But and I was like, oh, that might be cool for the future. Hint, hint. But also like, I guess my general philosophy with this kind of stuff is when you start like right away at the top, like Godzilla, King Ghidorah, whoever, like it to me it front loads your, like, as a product guy, right? It front loads everything, and so that as you get into like the B and C tier list characters, as it were, it starts to peter out, and that's not what I like to do with lines, right? That I've done in the past. And so I think the idea, and I think we talked about this the other day, is like the idea of like not starting with any of the big ones. I started, at least for the Godzilla side, for the Metalcropolis stuff, I started with Ghidorah, with Scarecrow Oven. And so I think that's like, and he's a popular character, but like, and then coming out of it, it's like, like I was like, oh yeah, Baragon. And like, I know kind of one of the fun things that we had, or we talked about with Baragon, and I think what kind of like made us like get more excited was just my dummy brain always thought of Baragon as a girl,
Right.
because of that one clip of the actress in the suit from GMK.
And I liked that a lot when you suggested it. I was like, yeah, I kind of want to start thinking of Baragon with she her pronouns and stuff, because that's just it was just a fun idea. It's new to the palette, because
yeah, and we're not saying that's official. It's just fun to think about. That's all it is, right? So obviously it's not official, so
I mean, we're gonna the problem is we're gonna get into the weeds on this, but screw it. It's my show now. Like, I've had conversations with folks folks who speak Japanese or are Japanese about this subject, and how pronouns don't work the same way in Japan in Japanese that they do in English. And so it's complicated and it's hard to explain, but like, actual gendered pronouns didn't really come into use in Japanese culture until I believe when they started translating Western novels and stuff, like novels from European countries. And so to say he or she or her is very weird in Japanese. Like, it's not a very natural way of speaking. But of course, there's very little one-to-one between Japanese and English.
Yeah.
But on the subject of kaiju specifically, they're kind of presented as being somewhat genderless. Like, they shift depending on the needs of the plot, or you know, like oftentimes they'll be referred to as it, if you're wanting to be literal as with your Japanese. I'm also don't speak Japanese, so I can't speak with this in any kind of authority. But I also think it's an interesting thought experiment to like, we tend to think of he as a default, especially when it comes to monsters and things that are
Yeah.
don't look feminine to us. I was hanging out in Osaka with some diehard Godzilla fans a few years back, and a bunch of them had all gotten together and decided that Titanosaurus was female. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. Is there a reason for that? And they said, she got them big hips.
Well, so does Godzilla, right? So
True. It's true.
and then maybe that's where the whole thing in the '90s American version came from, where it was able to reproduce. But the other thing, is kind of, I remember like thinking about this about a year or so ago when I was thinking about Hedera, and I thought I read somewhere that people considered it a female. And I don't know if that was a mistranslation because of like, I know that, the eyes were inspired by, female genitalia, the shape of them anyway. And so my brain was always like, oh, that's a girl. Like, I just don't, I mean, obviously everything you said makes sense to me. I mean, they're giant monsters. It doesn't matter really, because it's not like we really, with the exception of Rodan, that I can think of, we don't really get into their reproductive idea. Well, I guess Mothra too, right? Mothra, but that it doesn't really come up, right?
Well, with Mothra specifically?
Well, no, in general, like
general,
the breeding habits of kaiju doesn't really come up.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna get into the weeds here about like gender is a social construct and sexual dimorphism is a natural construct, is a natural concept. But I mean, generally, yeah, I think that again, just societally, we tend to default to male just as a matter of course for our culture. So it's interesting. I mean, I remember years ago, I worked on a unfortunately now defunct project called Colossal Kaiju Combat that was going to be like a crowdsourced giant monster fighting game being developed with the people who did the Godzilla fighting games from the early 2000s from Pipeworks. Cool. We did sort of a social experiment, basically, where we tried with just about every other monster, we tried to, instead of using he, we use she, just as a social experiment, really, because we just thought it would be nice to try something new. And the reaction was very interesting. Like, most of the people who would respond were like, oh, interesting, or oh, I didn't see that, or most people wouldn't comment on it in general. But you'd always get the one or two people who were like one person was like, oh, well, now I can't relate to this character, and I'm like, you're a sociopath.
Wait, let me just pause that for a second. Okay, if you're looking at a giant monster with multiple heads or multiple limbs or whatever it is, it's the size of a skyscraper, and its gender is what you can't relate to, like, that's absolutely insane. Like, for me, as a I was not a kid. Well, I guess I was technically a kid at the time of Jurassic Park comes out. I was a teenager, right? So Jurassic Park comes out. When they do movies like that, like Spielberg or at least Michael Crichton, they put kids in to these things so kids can relate to it. I always related to the monster, right? The dinosaur or whatever. That's what I always related to. And at no point watching Jurassic Park, obviously, like, I'm into the characters, the human characters, but I'm also like, yeah, let's see that dinosaur eat some people. At no point am I like, oh, wait a minute, that's a girl. They're all girls. Ew. Like, it's just, my brain doesn't, maybe it's just me. I think you as well. But like, if that's the issue, and I'm not even getting into, I don't even I don't even think this has to even go into like our current state of gender politics. I mean, obviously it touches against that, but I just find it fascinating that, if you like movies, for example, and you're someone that's around our age, 21, right? Wink, wink. But like, if you're older, like we are, older-ish, and you watch stuff like Alien or Aliens or Terminator 2, like, just using ubiquitous examples,
sure.
Like, how can you not be into that kind of story? when the female's the lead or one of the leads, that's like, kick ass or whatever. Again, I'm using this as just a very simple like baseline.
Sure.
And so like when you extrapolate that idea, like, oh, I can't, like I can watch those movies, because she's badass. Well, why couldn't a female Baragon be badass or cute or badass and cute at the same time or whatever? I mean, it's such a strange concept to me, that when you're talking about this sort of thing. But well, hey, heck of a first episode and first topic to start off on, so I appreciate it.
Well, it is. I think it's interesting. I think that even without necessarily getting didactic or getting on a soapbox, you can at least touch on the subject, because again, it's just baseline interesting to me sociologically.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, but I've always said it's important to interrogate your feelings on something, whether it be positive or negative. And, don't sit there and be like, well, I have positive feelings associated with this. Well, how can I make myself have negative feelings towards this? Like, obviously, that's not the goal. I think the idea is I think we could all stand to have a little more introspection. And if a female Baragon is the way to do that, then damn it, I think we are a step ahead of society.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, it's I'm thinking about it, and oh bloody hell, I just had a point in my head that just like escaped from me about this sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, look, when it boils down to it, Baragon's cute and it's a cool monster. I don't care. It, she, they, her, him. It's a cool monster, and what you did with it was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
And for those of you who don't know, like it's currently up on pre-order at ghostxghost.com. And Matt did the wonderful art. We had Christoph Spasdell did the logo for it. I'm not going to try to get too promotional focused here on this. So because this is like the second channel for Ghost X Ghost. This is our more fun one. The other one is like the ad focused one. But hey, I just kind of really learned about this morning. I mean, obviously you're a Godzilla and Kaiju fan in general. I'm assuming you have some love for Ultraman, yes?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Have you seen this new game that's coming out tomorrow? Well, tomorrow at time of recording, but it'll be out by the time this goes up. The Ultra Kaiju Monster Rancher.
Yeah.
Or Monster Farmer, as it's called in Japan. But have you?
Yeah.
Have you seen
I have seen it. I'm definitely gonna go ahead and get it for like the Switch, I think.
Yeah.
Which is just my Zelda machine at the moment. But but no, I'm really want to check it out. I friggin' love Ultraman. I'm very fortunate. I've actually gotten to work with Tsuburaya for quite a few years now. With all the stuff coming out now, I thought I would be dead in a ditch somewhere before Ultraman was going to be available at like Best Buy. Like I mean, and not just Ultraman, like the original Ultraman series gets released like every decade or so. Somebody comes out with a DVD or a DVD of dubious rights requirements. But it's only recently that they put like everything out. They put just about everything out on Blu-ray or DVD. I have an entire shelf of just Ultraman stuff, that not including all the toys I have over there, not including the pinball machine that I designed for Tsuburaya back in 2020.
That's right. Yeah.
But the new game, I'm really excited to try that because Ultraman gets so many weird little video games in Japan. Like there's so many Ultraman games and almost none of them have gotten American releases or English releases. And I did a voice in one of the games. I did a voice for it's sort of an arcade game called Ultraman Fusion Fight. And you need cards in order to scan. Like it's actually great synergy from a marketing perspective of like you get little cards from like the Bandai toys and you scan them at the arcade machine and then you like get your characters to fight each other. And I voiced Ultraman Belial for the English version they released in Malaysia and Singapore and stuff.
Random.
Yeah, well, I mean, English is one of the primary languages over there.
No, I mean that it wasn't for the US. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, at the time, this was right before there was any kind of US Ultraman market. Like, the US Ultraman market is brand new. So they were like, well, we need English releases for these other territories. So I was just in Tokyo at the time, and my editor, the publisher I work with over there, was like, hey, we also do translation work for Bandai, and they need English language people who speak English to come in and yell into a microphone. So yeah, so I did Belial, who, I don't know how much about Ultraman you know.
I know, like you know, well, here's the funny thing is I know, I recognize the monsters, right? The
Mhm.
kaiju, the villains, and I know some of their names, right? But it's just like I've got so much other dumb knowledge that I'm work a little bit more of that into my brain.
Oh yeah.
But the reason I brought up the game was because
Mhm.
I was just watching a streamer literally before we got on the call here play
Mhm.
it. She had an early Japanese version, early copy of it for Japan,
Uh-huh.
and it I was so charmed by it. Like, it was all in
Yeah.
Japanese. I didn't understand. Obviously, we'll get it the English version, but you're raising the basically you're raising the villains. Like
Yeah.
and you're feeding them, and it's Monster Rancher. Like, I mean, it's again Monster Farmer in Japan, called Monster Rancher here. So it's
Yeah.
a crossover, and I was just so charmed by it. She was playing oh my god, what's the guy's name with the crab claws?
Oh, Bolton.
Yeah, oh, Alien Bolton.
Yes.
And so she's playing him, and and it just was very charming. So I'm all into it. I'm all in on this game. Like, you know.
Oh yeah, no, I really want to try it because I'm glad you brought us back around to that episode. I was about to get like all in on Ultraman lore, Ultraman deep lore. So it's funny because the Ultraman monsters, the Ultra Kaiju, now obviously they are ostensibly the villains. I mean, not every monster is inherently evil.
Yeah.
But but it's so funny because a lot of the classic characters, which are the ones that are like in the ones that are popping up in this game specifically, a lot of those are very classic characters like Gomora, Baltan, Red King, Dada, and a couple other like Gen 1 Ultra Kaiju. Those characters are kind of treated as very precious nowadays. Like, Subaraya is very precious with them, and as a result, like Baltan, for example, just started off as just a villain, with maybe there was a little bit of interesting nuance to their character, but for the most part, they're just bad guys. Because those characters have been around for so long and are so popular, the writers working on the shows are like, all right, well, let's dig into this a little bit and let's see what motivates them and kind of what makes them, oh, okay, so they're not all bad, or there's some of them are good and some of them are bad. And Gomora, he's got the crescent horns and stuff. He is like straight up was like a hero for several years in a row. There was a series called Ultra Galaxy where it was more like Pokemon, where characters like, and they had cards and they'd scan the cards and it would release a monster, and the main character's partner monster was Gomora, and it was like this partnership, like this kind of like a spiritual friendship kind of thing. And so Gomora kind of became like this hero character for several series, and it's just really funny. I think that's one of the things that charms me about it, is like they take characters and are just like, oh no, these are like nuanced good guys that you can raise them to farm for you.
So look, you'll catch me playing that tomorrow. Hopefully you'll play it too, and we can nerd out another time about like which Ultra Kaiju that we're raising properly there. So
I'm excited.
So I mean, do you play a lot of games?
I try to. Most of my game exposure comes from going on. I go to a friend's place here in Austin, and we do YouTube stuff for RageSelect.com, and so that's a lot of my exposure to games nowadays, is just doing Let's Plays with my co-host Jeff. But as far as stuff that I play on my own, I yeah, I'll try a lot of different stuff, but generally the way it works between like my scheduling and my hyperfixation is that I'll zero in on like one or two specific games for a given period of time. Like I keep going back to Breath of the Wild. I'm a huge Zelda fan. I have a Link cosplay that I take to like Ren fairs and stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's kind of like a middle-aged Link where I've got like armor and like a pauldron and stuff where it's like, oh, I've seen some shit. And, but right now I'm actually going back and playing Ghost of Tsushima, which is just a badass game. Like it's so
see,
cool.
you're killing me right now because that's on my shelf of needs to be played, which is way bigger than have played games. So Ghost of Tsushima, and so many others. Breath of the Wild is another one I haven't played yet. Because like you, I get hyper focused, but my hyper focus is like for like 15 minutes, right? So like I can only, this is just my stupid brain, is that like, so I'll play like Overwatch or Overwatch 2 now, but like I'll play that for like 15 minutes, be like, all right, that's enough for me. And then like I'll go back and play like, oh, my Konami Castlevania collection, and play like Castlevania 4 or my Contra collection, like, you know, the old stuff that I grew up on.
Sure.
But I mean, you know, in terms of like more modern games, I think I'm waiting to get a PS5 before I start like jumping into like, you know, Zero Dawn or the new one. And there's even like Miles Morales Spider-Man that I haven't played for like 2 years just because I'm waiting for a PS5. So anyway, so like my hyper fixation just becomes like I start just playing older games so I don't get like tempted to play newer games with some exceptions. So I like, you know, which I admire people that can like, you bust out like Elden Ring in a week and finish it. You know, it's just like I can never do that. I mean, I don't have time, but also like I would be so frustrated by it.
I did try Elden Ring, I mean, it's a beautiful game, and it's like I think it's obviously very well made. And I have to caveat with that because people sometimes, they don't get mad at me, but they'll get like, but why didn't you keep playing it? Or what's the problem? Like I can explain to you in exhaustive detail why it's a great game. It's like, I know it's a great game, but From Software games proc my anxiety real bad. And there's a rhythm to From Soft games, like stuff like Dark Souls and Bloodborne and Elden Ring, which I've played all, I've tried all of them. I really tried to stick with Bloodborne for a while, but I get this tightness in my chest where I'm just like, do I need a beta blocker or something? Like I'm all kinds of stressed out. And it's because I know I'm going to die. I'm going to have to go through this again. I'm going to fight all these guys again. And I only have so much patience for that. Like, that's why I like stuff like Zelda, because while there is a degree of challenge to it, it's not so challenging to where I'm doing the same thing over and over again. And I'm progressing. Like I did, that new Horizon game, because I loved the first one. So I
Zero
picked
Dawn
up Forbidden West.
Whatever it's called.
Zero Dawn was the first one. Forbidden West.
Forbidden West.
I picked up the second one, and it's really good. It's really well done. But I was kind of at a point where, like, I just right now at this point in my life, I just need something where I can relax and kind of just fall into something for a couple of hours, then go back to work. So I just put it on easy, and I was just like, and I'm just blasting through it. I'm having a great time.
There's zero shame in the easy game, my friend. There's zero shame in that. I do that all the time, especially if sometimes I'm just like, I just want to see the story. But this, you're right. It's and I'm not an anxious person, but the anxiety, and also just maybe I just don't have the skills for it. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, I think it's just okay to bounce off of something. It's okay. I think, and that's something that, you know, if we're going to get into more sociological constructs, I think that this is something I've run into a couple of times where I have to tell people, like, you know, it's okay to just not like something, right? Like, it's okay to just, and not even necessarily not like it. You just bounce off of it. You're just like, I'm good. Like, I tried it. I'm good. And like, you know, and sometimes folks will you know, simply because they want to share something with someone that they like, they're like, well, are you sure? Like, did you play it right? Or did you do it? And there is an argument to be made there, but for the most part, it's like, yeah, I don't have time. I would like, it would have been nice, but I'm moving on. I've moved on. I've maybe I'll come back to it future, but yeah, like I heard, I just remembered, like, I'm thinking about the games that I've been playing recently, like Ghost of Tsushima. I played that on like medium difficulty when I first played it, and now I'm playing it again, and I'm just like, okay, medium plus, because I'm doing New Game Plus, and I'm like, okay, maybe it'd be a little harder, and I'm like, oh, I'm too good at now. I'm too good at just knifing dudes in the neck. So let me go hard plus, and I'm still kind of like, okay, there's a little more challenge now. It's keeping me on my toes, but it's not so challenging where I'm just getting wrecked every time I accidentally pull more than 3 guys. So yeah, but I mean, there's so much content, it's impossible to consume all of it. So you've got to be selective.
So yeah, so that's what I want to touch on is earlier you're talking about how, you know, it's okay not to like something. It's okay to like something. It's okay not to like something. Or like when, you know, I hang out with, you know, certain friends, they're like, dude, have you seen this TV show? And I'm like, no, like, you got to watch it. You know, everyone's heard that kind of thing. But my issue is like, I've just gotten to the point where like, I'm like, tell me about it a little bit. Okay, I'm never going to watch that. No offense to whatever it is. I just don't think that's for me, at least right now. And they're like, but I'm like, well, okay, if we're going to do the but game, then let's play. Okay, then I'm going to give you, you know, an anime to watch. And they're like, oh, I don't watch that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, there you go. So, you know, you know, I mean, it's apples to oranges, sort of, kind of, but like, you know, the idea of like, you know, I think of several of my friends that are like that are like, dude, you got to watch, it's the best. Like, you know, you don't know what you're missing. I'm like, well, you know, I've just spent like, you know, 3 months watching, you know, however many different like anime series. I'm using that as a nerdy example.
Sure.
Like, you don't know you're missing with that. Like, it's amazing, but I'm not going to sit there and push it on you because I know it might not be your thing. So, yeah, and also, and this is where I'm probably gonna you know, have people coming at me with pitchforks and torches. I also think it's okay to like something like Game of Thrones final season. It's fine. People are like, it's the worst thing ever. It's not. You gotta, if you think that's the worst thing ever, you have to watch more stuff, because that's like maybe like the characters didn't do what you wanted. Maybe it did feel rushed, but I watched it. I'm like, it's fine. You know, I like the show a lot, but like, I guess I was never like, you know, that hard, that like obsessed with it where I'm like analyzing theories, what's going to happen next. I'm not that guy. So when I watched it, I'm like, that's cool. All right, cool. Right on. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and people are like, how can you say that? Because it is the worst thing, and it's such a betrayal of character. I'm like, is it? I don't know. I've seen way worse things than this, and you know, that's just how I feel about it, right? So.
No, I feel like that's perfectly. I've never, or rather, that's not true. In the past, when I was dumb and young and ugly, I would get into arguments with people about a thing they liked, and I was so used to listening to angry YouTubers that I was like, okay, well, here's why this thing you like is inherently problematic, or inherently, like, here's why it could be morally wrong for you to like this thing. And but even back then, I always felt weird about telling someone why the thing they liked, why they shouldn't like the thing they like. And now, just as an adult, I'm like, I like whatever you want. Like, I spent my whole damn life being told this thing that you love more than anything else, more than certain relatives, the kaiju genre and tokusatsu is stupid. This is stupid, and no one's gonna like you because you like this. I was told, like, you would never be in a relationship with anyone because you like this stupid thing that is not like a mainstream thing. And I'm like, okay, like, back all the way up until you're out of my life, because you don't need that kind of energy in your life. It just, and you never want to take somebody's joy somebody's joy that they get from something, if you try to take that from them, there's something wrong with you. Like let's be clear about something. If it is something actively harmful, like, boy, I sure like drinking bleach and I love feeding it to my kids.
Yeah.
Maybe don't do that. But if it's not hurting anyone, like there's some folks who grew up with Twilight and they even if they're adults and they're like, yeah, it's kind of dumb, but I still have like these warm feelings for this time in my life, and I still like kind of have a reaction to certain things when I rewatch this movie. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think you're right. I think when you go after that joy in somebody else's life, it can be in some circumstances a way to replace the lack of joy in your own, right? And maybe not you, but in general, maybe one doesn't have as much imagination or as much like carefreeness or whatever it takes. It's like the quote that has been going around for the past couple of years, which is, don't kill the cringe, kill the part of you that cringes, right?
I like that.
Yeah. And so like, and I've in my older age of 22, I think, I've decided that I don't care anymore. I don't care. Like, I like what I like.
I mean, I'm a very social creature. I would say that I'm kind of I guess you could say a cusp when it comes to introvert extrovert. Like I like doing live streams a lot. I love talking to people, interacting with people. I love going to cons and things like that. It was one of the reasons why the lockdowns were so hard on me, because I was just like so immediately isolated. And but then I'll hit a certain point where I'm like, and I'm done. And I'm done, and I'm going home, or I need to go disassociate for a little while and play a video game, or fuss with my action figures or something, or draw, maybe, to do my job. But when it comes to like, my thing was that I wanted to share things I liked with people I liked. And that can be really hard when your interests are very niche, or in the case of kaiju and monster stuff, it's sometimes hard because it's very rare that you can get someone into this stuff when they're an adult and their suspension of disbelief has already kind of solidified. Like, because when you're a kid and you're watching actors in suits clobber each other, that is there's a visceral joy to that, because as a kid, one, you don't really care that it doesn't look like this is real, but two, there's almost like this toy box mentality to it, where like, oh, I could see myself with my toys smashing stuff, and you're just having fun. You try to show this stuff to another adult, especially an adult who's maybe grown up entirely on American movies, and to quote David Callett, Western audiences, when they see a special effect in a movie that's not totally convincing, that's perceived as a mistake. Whereas on the Japanese side of things, it's kind of like, whatever, throw it at the screen. If it looks cool, do it. I mean, I literally have an action figure of the tiny fake horse from Frankenstein Conquers the World. That fake ass horse that doesn't look like it looks like a little puppet, but they put it in anyway because they're like, this is fun. This is fun. We're having fun. Remember fun? And anyway, but I'm very fortunate in that recently I've managed to get some friends, like really into this stuff. I work with a publisher called Unlikely Heroes. We just launched a Kickstarter recently for our next Miss Medusa issue. I do a semi-regular show with them now where I send them Godzilla movies and kaiju movies, and we watch it, and then we do a live stream talking about it, and they're like into it now. Like, and they were all like, we didn't know anything about this genre. We were very like arm's length at best. And now they're like getting the Ishiro Honda biography, and like they're building up their collections. They're getting tickets to the Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla screening that's happening next month. Yeah. And like, and it's just like those moments are so few and so precious.
You know, I've talked about this, I think, on other like podcasts that I've been a guest on, where it's like, you know, I think, and I'm not saying anyone should live my life the way I live it, or live their life the way I live it, because don't do that. But you know, the idea of being a bit of a net, and kind of going out there and trying to find something new, and not always having it be recommended on the top, you know, Netflix, you know, recommended watch, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
dig into some deep stuff. Like go on, you know, like weird, like YouTube things where you can find really obscure movies and stuff that are on YouTube, just for example, for free. Just say, oh, I'm going to check this out, whether it's Japanese or if it's Russian or whatever it may be. One example is, and this isn't like a super obscure, because it's fairly well known, but like there's a movie, an old Russian movie from the 60s called VIY, and it's been like remade and inspired, but it's like a Russian folklore ghost story, right? It's about this like this priest in training who has to spend the night with this corpse of this woman for 3 nights, like to and bless her, to make sure she, you know, her soul goes to heaven. But the corpse isn't really a girl, it's a witch. So each night it gets progressively stranger and scarier. It's a pretty fun movie.
It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's on Shudder right now. And it's just a little bit over an hour, like an hour 15, something like that, minutes long. And you know, it goes in some weird places in terms of just like takes a little bit to get there, but once you get to the 3 nights, it's fun. And it's, I mean, if you want to talk about like people looking at dated effects, it's dated as fuck, right? But I find that stuff so charming. I'm so charmed by it. Like what you were saying before about seeing stuff as a mistake. I've always looked at as a kid, like, I don't know what it was. I don't know where this happened, but when I saw a film and there's like a matte painting in the background, right? It doesn't have to be like a sci-fi, or it could be like a drama. Or there's an effect used for something regular, or stop motion used here for some weird reason, action film, or whatever it may be. Like, I've always, like, my brain's always zeroed in on that stuff, because I was fascinated by like, oh wait, how did they do that? Or, you know, or hey, people actually had to like put their hands on something to make that.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So when you look at, I used this random example a few years ago at a panel I was on. There's a movie from the 80s called The Accidental Tourist. And I think it's got Jeff Bridges in it. I could be wrong. William Hurt, one of those guys. Don't remember. But I remember my brother was watching it when I was a kid, and it's like a guy's on an airplane, and there's exterior shot of the airplane, the commercial liner, going past the camera. That's clearly an effect, right? It was like a miniature, superimposed. And I was like, stop. I want to go back and watch that. And he's like, what are you talking about? It's just I was like, you didn't understand that, like, I wanted to look at like, okay, you know, was this like a miniature or was it a paint? I wanted to understand like what it's like literally half a second long. And like, so like my brain is always hyper focused on that stuff. So when I watch stuff like you know, like kaiju stuff, or for me, like one of my favorite films is the Japanese film from '77, House, or Hasu, right? That film is imperfect as fuck in terms of effects. I don't care. It is a work of art to me, and I know a lot of others. It's just this movie that has so much imagination in it that I like watching it, studying it, like figuring out, like, is that something I could do, like in my own house, like in terms of effects? And there's like such a childish journey through that, being that was co-written by the director's daughter, who was 10 years old at the time, so that's why it's childish. So, have you seen the movie?
Oh yeah, I saw it a couple of years ago. A friend brought it over for Halloween, and we watched it. And I'm just like, this is buck wild. Yeah. And I had heard of it. I had heard of it before that, but I finally got to see it, and I'm just like, man, this is so bananas. And it's like, because it really is like a playground for special effects. It was clear that like the people making it were just like, let's just go wild. Let's see what we can do with, because people often say like, oh, older effects are so limited. And it's like, no, older effects required more work. And that's not to say that modern CG artists don't work their behinds off and should maybe be getting paid better. But that's to say, though, is that it used to be, though, effects were simply more complicated. You had to create technology on the fly in order to, I mean, the original Godzilla is a great example of, this was a bunch of filmmakers who had lost everything after the war. Like their industry had collapsed. They had to rebuild the industry, and they had to basically create techniques that they saw in like American movies, and then be like, all right, how do we do that? So they had to just throw stuff at the wall and see what stuck. But you talking about like even being a kid and kind of seeing, you know, the architecture of an effect. I remember one of my core memories is from Thanksgiving, I want to say 2015, give or take. No, earlier than that. I went home to be with my family for Thanksgiving, and it was a big one because we had the whole clan came out, like a bunch of my little cousins and nieces and nephews all came out.
Yeah.
And at one point, the parents were like, well, Matt, you're the childless adult. You get these kids away from us for a few hours and maybe get to like watch a movie with them. And I'm like, all right, that's my shtick. And so I was like, oh, well, I actually brought a Godzilla movie. I think it'll be fun to show the kids. And then, of course, the parents were like, well, don't you think they'd want to watch Polar Express or something? And I said, let's put it to a vote. I asked the kids, you want to watch Polar Express or you want to watch Godzilla? And they all said Godzilla. And, Destroy All Monsters, and we put it on. And at first, some of the older kids were bouncing off of it a little bit because, you know, they're getting older, they're getting a little more cynical, a little more like, look how smart I am. I can identify basic objects in space. And like, you know, and so as a result, they were kind of leaning into making fun of it. And so I started not trying to like necessarily mansplain the movie or anything, but just try to be like, well, putting on that rubber suit, it's a 150-pound rubber suit, and he, you know, and Nakajima had to, he lost like 25 pounds of water weight per filming, and like kind of throwing factoids at them. And then at a certain point, they really started getting into it, and they started trying to figure out how they did the effects. Like,
that's fun.
There's a gunfight in that movie. And one guy like gets shot in the forehead, and it's a little bit of a goofy scene because he gets shot and his eyes cross and then he falls over. But it's got that red, like there's like, you can see the red kind of on his forehead. And the kids were kind of sitting there being like, okay, I bet they had ketchup in the gun and the ketchup hit him in the forehead. And I'm like, you know, you're probably not that far off. It was just really fun, and they all were into it. By the end of the movie, they were into it, and so it was really fun to see their little brains, and also for me to mold their little brains. You know,
yeah, I think that's great. I mean, because you know, when you get them young, like I got young, and I was introduced to, you know, Star Wars and Harryhausen and all kinds of fun stuff when I was very, very young. To where like, I've been to every. Besides the original Star Wars, this is going to date me really quick. Besides the original Star Wars, because that's the year I was born, I was at the opening night of every Star Wars film.
Oh, period. Wow.
So, you know, Empire, Jedi, prequels, new films. And then, you know, but so the reason I'm saying that is not as a boast, but like, that's how early I was indoctrinated, right? Like I was like really, really early. And then like, taking my dad was married to an evil woman in the early 80s. Not my mother, but my first stepmother. And so he was like, okay, Brock, we're going out to, I was 5 years old. And he goes, we're going out to Father Sunday today. I was like, oh, great. So he took me out, went to Burger King. I got my little crown. And he goes, okay, so after lunch, we're going to go see a movie. And you're not allowed to tell anyone you saw this movie, but we're going to go see a movie called Conan the Barbarian.
Oh, Oh,
So,
nice.
so now remember, I'm 5 years old, and if you've seen this film, you know that's not a movie for a 5-year-old.
No.
So I would definitely get scared when people are getting their heads cut off. But like anytime there's a boob on screen, I was like big smile, and my father would put his hand over my eyes. But of course, his eyes are on the screen, so I would just peek around it. So and of course, like the and like I guess he wasn't allowed to go see the movie. Like it was some wild reason, that he wasn't able to go see the movie, without like pretending it was Father's Sunday. But it's one of my favorite films. I've got a tattoo of one of the swords in the movie on me, and so like again, like I like that because I think that the problem we have nowadays, back in my day, but the problem we have with is the rise of sarcasm and cynicism, right?
Oh yeah.
Which have their place, they certainly do, but cinema sins or stuff like that, where it's like every single thing that's wrong with this film, you know what I mean? Like it gets, I can't watch that stuff anymore because I get frustrated. It's like, well, yeah, there are movies where we can talk about the plot and how as you get into like the second act, it doesn't really feel like certain things are justified. We can like get into the nitty gritty on it, but getting into like basic, like, oh, when he, got up, the soda can was on this side of the table. When he came back, it was on this side of the table. Like, the minutia of it, it gets so boring to me. Like, I just don't care. Like when people like were posting pictures of like, from like Game of Thrones, the first series, and then where you can see like the Starbucks cup, right? And I love it. I love that. I didn't see it. I never saw it until I saw screenshots, but I love that that's there. Because it just shows you that like, people are human, man. It's human. It's like, it's fun. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the problem is that when you get overly obsessed with, you're missing the forest for the trees, and I think that's kind of given rise to this. I do think there has been a bit of pushback against that in recent years, like. To this idea of like the cynicism towards film, the cinema sins effect. I think there's been a pushback against that, where people are just like, I just want to enjoy a movie, man. And because now a lot of that mentality, which used to be the mentality of like diehard film nerds who still like this stuff, they just like talking about it in those minute details, that's now been co-opted by this cottage industry of people who are like, they think cynicism is the same as being smart. And it's I remember I used to listen to the Cracked podcasts and stuff. I used to listen to those guys back when before that website imploded. And I used to really like a lot of their content, and they felt like a fairly decent balance of like the sort of cynical rib poking versus like, hey, this is actually a good movie, or hey, maybe this movie is as bad as we thought it was. But for the most part, it kind of leaned in the other camp of like, haha, I'm laughing at this thing, or I'm tearing down your preconceptions of a movie you love. And I remember it hit like a nexus point for me when I heard these guys talking about Pacific Rim on a podcast. Now, I think Pacific Rim is fine. I think it's fine. I like the movie. I think it's charming, and I really can feel Del Toro just having a lot of fun with it. It's just never blown my mind as a film. But anyway, I mean, it's fine. But it became such a punching bag for those kind of people on the internet who can't stand when something is earnest, like is 100% earnest. They think like, well, that means it's stupid. And the Cracked guys were saying things like, well, I think Pacific Rim is stupider than any Michael Bay Transformers movie. It is just the stupidest, most puerile, childish nonsense. And somebody else, one of the other guys, was like, that movie is just Transformers plus Godzilla. It's just those two things. And I'm like, okay, so you don't know anything about either of those two franchises then. It's Evangelion plus Ultraman, which is to say it's just Ultraman. But you could also say it's Ultraman plus Mazinger Z. Anyway, the point is that being cynical about the media you consume doesn't make you smart. Same thing with like, I like Rick and Morty, but there is a stripe of Rick and Morty fan that thinks that, again, part of the running joke of that show is we're going to make fun of this pop culture trope or this storytelling trope. Don't you feel smart now? And there are people who kind of take that literally, where it's like, yeah, this entire genre is stupid. And I'm like, come on,
yeah,
guys.
I'm actually glad you brought up Rick and Morty, because I was thinking about Rick and Morty earlier in our conversation. I don't remember what context. It's like, it was stuff that people like that you don't like, or you like that other people don't like. And that's one of them for me. That was one that where I've given a few episodes. I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, this is clever. But I think what you just pointed out is the reason why I don't like it, is because it's the fandom. And there's a few things like that, but that's one of the ones where I like, look, no offense to anybody that likes that show. Obviously you like that show. But I think that it's the certain fans and that you're just talking about that turn me off, where I'm like, I don't want to be mistaken for that. And so I'm like, and it's not really fair to the show. And I made product for Rick and Morty, a few years ago, and like, did well, and it was fun to do, and and again, I enjoy it, but like, man, that's one of those things where like I you really hit it the nail on the head with the idea of like, it's just that certain fan that like, it's just like, that's how I feel with like, almost everything has that, right? Whether it's Star Wars, whether it's the Marvel stuff, any of the bigger stuff has. So what I've decided personally is that like when people are like, oh, you must be a Marvel fan or whatever, I'm like, I like some of the movies. Does that make me a fan of all things? Like, I except for Star Wars, I'm a Star Wars fan, but like, I don't like everything that comes out of Star Wars, but I like a lot of it. So I'm a nerd, and stuff. But I also like horror. Like, look, I like kaiju films. I like musicals. I like dramas. I like everything. I tried to drama. What the hell is a drama? Dramas.
I like the drama.
Dramas. I like them dramas. But
yeah.
But like, I don't know. Again, like I try to have that, like, again, be that net. Like, try to catch the things that I think are like are fascinating. And like, I think that when even though a lot of my stuff with GXG is, I have a lot of Godzilla stuff. That's just because I'm just getting started, and that's one of the things that like I wanted to do first, because I had this idea, right? But I have other interests, and not just T-shirts. Like we got other things on the horizon. So hopefully we get to there. I do have an interview type question for you, though.
Sure.
Got to end our time here.
This is good.
I mean, you'll end it when it feels right.
Sure.
What's the most obscure kaiju that you like?
Man, I mean, my go-to answer is usually Varan is usually the Toho monster I tend to gravitate towards, as far as like, this is an obscure monster that the only reason anyone knows that this character is because it's associated with Godzilla, vaguely. And but it's such a unique and fascinating design that feels like it's never really gotten its day in the sun. Like, it keeps, many filmmakers have tried to put Varan in different movies and over the years, and it's just he always gets cut because usually because the Toho wants to go with something more popular, like King Ghidorah or Rodan. Like, I was just looking at it, there's an ad that came up. They're doing an expansion to the Godzilla ride in Japan, the one that's at Seibun theme park, and it's like a really cool looking ride. I'm going to try to go check it out when I go to Tokyo next month. But it's Godzilla, Ghidorah, and Rodan, and they're new designs, which is cool. I like that they gave them new designs, and hey, that's awesome. But I can't talk much about it, but recently I was on I was talking to somebody about a license gig for Godzilla, and I think it might have stalled out, but we were talking about what monsters, and it was like Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, Ghidorah. And I'm like, if every single Spider-Man thing was Green Goblin, Venom, Doc Ock, like every single thing without any variation, that people would have bounced off that franchise years ago, and like it wouldn't. I don't think it would be as. I mean, obviously those characters keep coming back, but
Yeah.
they try to mix it up. Like, I don't know. Like but when it comes to like weird offshoot characters from the Godzilla franchise, really obscure ones like Varan have a lot of potential to kind of dig into. Like, Varan feels less like just another dinosaur creature and more like there's something eldritch about Varan, because I remember there's a line from the American version where a character says that somebody got killed by Varan. He said he died of fright. He was so scared it stopped his heart. Now that's an old monster movie cliche, but that's also very interesting because there is something supernatural and something like elder god about Varan that I think could be leaned into if they would just give it a chance.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was funny because in like, in like the Heisei era, when you got Biollante to kind of like, not technically started off, but like kind of started off. We had Return of Godzilla, but to me it's Biollante is the first movie. And then you end it. It's funny because then you end it with Destroya, and then but everything else in between there is like, right, except for Space Godzilla. But like everything else in between is like the kind of go-tos, right? I always the ones with the newer characters are the ones I prefer, because it's like, oh cool, we don't see this character in as many films, right? Because they only have one films. So I feel you with Varan, like for me, like I look like Gorgo's mom, the main monster in Gorgo, like I always liked that as a kid. But my favorite is, and if you know my not you, but I have that one too. But if you have if you know my history in toys, then people might know that it's Pulgasari. Pulgasari is such a cool design in my opinion. The film's okay, like it's the story around the film that's cooler, like more interesting, I should say. But that design is so freaking cool. And I just wish that, more kaiju fans would be like, because you can watch the film on YouTube. It's right there. It's subtitled. It's right there waiting for you. And if you haven't seen it before, and again, the movie's okay. It's fine. It's whatever. But like, the monster's so cool. It's like, we made a bunch of figures of it when I was at Mondo. So it's like,
I have a little bit of a story too with Varan specifically. So when I was regularly working at IDW on Godzilla stuff, I mean, technically I'm back now and working on some new stuff. But when I was like, and this was like 2013, we got like the green light. It was me and Chris Mowry. We had been wanting to do a Godzilla ongoing, just the two of us. Chris, who now works at Toho, so congrats to him. And we were, we were told like, okay, you guys basically have carte blanche. Like you can kind of do whatever you want. We're giving y'all a shot to do like an ongoing, because basically I think we were kind of all that was left who wanted to still do an ongoing, because at the time they had gone through two other ongoings before that, Kingdom of Monsters and what was retroactively called History's Greatest Monster. And I think both of those series petered out in a way because for various reasons. I think, and so finally IDW was like, okay, you nerds, we're gonna give you guys a crack at this. And one of the first things I said was, I want an issue where Varan is like the main monster. I want like one issue, and Varan can come back as a recurring character if we want, but I just want one that spotlights him. And we were kicking ideas back and forth, and I think we came down on like Varan versus Rodan, which just sounded like a really fun fight, and we could get some intrigue in there with some other stuff going on. But anyway, eventually we got to the actual like scheduling the issues out, and doing a monthly comic is really hard. just gonna say that.
I can only imagine.
It's just trying to stick to that deadline, especially for someone like me, where I would prefer to put a lot of detail into my pages. But if you're doing a monthly comic, it's real hard to do that unless you've got a lot of shortcuts. And at the time, I was barely doing any of this digitally. I was doing it all by hand, all pen and paper. So we came to an agreement where it's like, okay, Matt, you'll do 4 issues, and then we'll have a break where Jeff Zorno will come in and he'll do like a fill-in issue for you. And the way it shook out was he wound up doing the Varan versus Rodan issue. And I'm like, no, this is what I wanted to do. But it was fine because it worked as like a kind of a break in the overarching story. And so he kind of wound up doing these kind of interstitial stories. So then that comic got released in Japan. Rulers of Earth started getting released in Japan. It was actually, I believe, one of the first Godzilla comics from America to get released in Japanese. And then a word got around that Keizo Murase, who was like the guy who built the Varan suit, and he built a ton of other stuff for Toho, but he built the Varan suit. Word got around that he found out about the comic, and him and the people he worked with started trying to kind of get in touch with me and be like, oh, Murase-san really likes the comic, really likes how Varan is in it. And I'm like, well, that wasn't me. That was Jeff, but thank you for your kind words. I'll pass that along. But because I started talking to Murase, and by extension, my buddy Daisuke Sato, who directed Howl from Beyond the Fog, we all started kind of communicating, and I got to meet Murase-san. And it was so funny because he was looking like he's a little old man, little teeny tiny old man. And he's like looking at the drawings I've made of Varan, and he's like, oh yes, well, the nose here, you could bring that out more. And like he's like, and I'm like, motherfucker's critiquing my art. All right. But I was happy for it because I'm like, he would know. And I remembered I gave him a new drawing, like a gift of a sketch of Varan. Oh, you got the face right. So it was a really cool experience to like get to forge that relationship. And he's such a sweet old man, and everybody who works with that whole crew are just so cool and so nice. So that's my Varan story.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I think with that, and is actually a perfect place to end because well, people will understand why in maybe a few months of why that's a good place to end. But Matt, I just want to say thank you very much. We'll put all your links in the description below. And thank you and everybody else. Thanks for listening. See you next time.